We're recording now, so I'm gonna ask you guys to speak only in the chat and leave your video off, just so that I don't broadcast anybody on the internet. That would not be cool. Um, so here's our plan for tonight, and I would recommend that you may want to take screenshots. I've done this slideshow a bunch of times, and you may want to have the screenshots. Oh no, you can just have the slides. Um, let's see here. I want to talk about your last few days of studying, and then I want to talk about what to take on test day, what to expect, and you can see it on the screen. You can read it yourself. I'm also going to do this maybe more quickly on Wednesday in my classes in APES, but I don't think I'll have enough time on Wednesday. So um, this is like your last prep day. Um, After we finish with all of this, then I'm going to stop the recording. And if anybody has questions about stuff that's happened while you've been studying in the last week, then we can all chat. It might be a good time to stick around because other people might share your questions or you might learn from other people's questions. And then as soon as we're done, I'm going to go right back to bed because I'm dying. Um, First of all, what you should be studying now is just your notes, focusing on your weakest units. Um, Honestly, if you have a study buddy that really pushes you to question your thinking and helps you study, do it. But I have to caution you, most study buddies is just social time, so be disciplined about that. Um, I don't recommend flashcards. If there's like something that you need to cram so you'll memorize it the day before the exam, you could do that, but flashcards are for a different type of memory than AP tests will use. So I don't really recommend flashcards. What I do think you need to do is really go deep into each topic. Um, there's these like really generic answers where people will say, we should not use nuclear power because it's bad for the environment. Or heavy tillage is bad for ecosystems. And you should know that that's like never going to be the right answer. It's not that you're wrong, it's that you're not right enough. You're not really telling us anything. Um, so what you should study is like the specific variables. For example, if somebody says, why is untreated sewage a problem for humans living downstream? And you said it's bad for water quality. That's too generic. It's too vague. That doesn't really show that you know anything. But if you were just a little bit more careful, like it increases the turbidity of water, that's one possible answer. It would be okay to say it increases the turbidity of water because that's a variable you can measure. If you don't know, turbidity is cloudiness. So untreated sewage makes water more cloudy. I'm not really here to teach you about untreated sewage. I mean, as an example of a good answer, that speaks in a variable you could measure. You could say the decomposition of untreated sewage lowers dissolved oxygen levels. Great. Encourages the population of coliform bacteria. Great. I will caution you that whatever you're studying in the next 4 days, you have to study to the point of finding a variable that you can measure. Um, if you ask your doctor like, "Hey, do you think I need to eat less hamburgers?" and he says, "Yes, they're bad for you." You'd be like, "Huh, okay, that's cool." And then you say, "Hey, should I just like eat lettuce?" And he goes, "Yes, that's good for you." First of all, you probably know that there's details missing in those answers. And even if you like the simplicity, if your doctor only says good for you, bad for you, good for you, bad for you, at some point you'd be like, dude, do you really know what you're talking about? I think that you should imagine that you're talking to like a 2-year-old, and maybe you've seen that 2-year-olds will ask a why question, and then they'll ask a why question, and then they'll ask a why question. So untreated wastewater is bad for quality. Imagine a 2-year-old is asking you why, and you say, because it encourages bacteria. And they go, why? And you're like, well, because decomposition uses up the oxygen. And like now you've reached a variable that you could measure. Uh, Keep going in your studies until you reach that spot, like you got to the last why question, to like a variable you can measure. If you have questions about what I said, put them in the chat. If not, I'm going to continue. Okay, then. On test day, you'll need to take everything on this screen. I recommend you to take a screenshot. I'm going to keep moving. You're going to need a couple pencils, and they should be sharpened in advance. You're going to need a couple of pens, blue or black only, no wacky colors. You're going to need a calculator. Um, Honestly, most AP exams you'll do fine without a calculator. I keep saying that, and one time they asked a question that it really did help. So take a calculator. I don't want to get in trouble for telling you otherwise, but you don't need anything fancy. Excuse me. And they won't let you use a calculator that has Wi-Fi or a calculator that has an alphanumeric keyboard, like a QWERTY keyboard, a letter keyboard. Um, like a simple scientific calculator should be plenty. A graphing calculator is probably fine. If you're using it in your math class, it's probably going to be okay. But they have a list of no calculators. And they'll walk around, and at some point they might see you with a calculator out and they disqualify you. So remember, that's the two things they're looking for: a calculator that's Wi-Fi enabled, and a calculator that has a QWERTY keyboard, like a typing keyboard. Um, I really like the fancy erasers. Do I have one here? Do you see one? Like the white artist erasers. I wish I had an example here. I do have a bunch in my room. So if you want to check one out from me, I have enough to check out to students. Well, I'm sorry about that. But you'll need like the artist erasers, the fancy kind of smooth white ones. Those are perfect because they won't leave streaks. Um, the reason you need a clear water bottle is that way you can have it with you during testing. And like if you start to cough or whatever, you don't want to lose 10 minutes walking away from your desk to go find a thing to go drink water and stuff. They're supposed to let you keep a water bottle under your desk as long as it can't hide writing. The classic is kids would like cut the label, write cheat notes on the inside, and then seal it back up. So they would walk into the test, put it on the thing, and then they would like look down into the bottle. So at some point it became okay if it's clear, but not if it could hide a label. I don't know. That's just a recommendation. For many years now, the most of the students I've seen will have like a Nalgene or like a metal water bottle, and it seems like Hazel lets kids get away with it. So, my recommendation is clear water bottle. You could roll the dice; it might work out.
If you're gonna use like one of the white erasers, make sure you like rub off any pencil dust left on it, because mine picks it like dust.
Yeah, Ona reminds me that your white eraser should be clean before you erase, because sometimes you'll have pencil lead on the eraser and that can add a streak. Um, Finally, you should take snacks, and there's like brain science that eating natural sugars is good for you. um, fruit sugars or honey sticks or something like that. Um, Similar to snacks that like long distance cyclists or long distance runners or swimmers will use during an event. Sugars that are quick to digest. Um, so those are the snacks that I recommend. Also, from one student, I see that I missed a question about calculators. And yeah, I think that you would normally be fine without a calculator. One year they asked a question where a calculator really would have helped, and so I'll have to cover all the bases and say it's probably better for you to take a calculator. Um, but I'm fairly confident you won't need it. Are there any other questions about what to take on test day? Put them in the chat if you do. Remember, we're recording, so you can't unmute. Let's see. Here's what you could expect on test day. You'll have 90 minutes with 80 multiple choice questions. About half of them are going to be really simple, like a sentence or two, and then like four choices, and then you move on. They're called standalone, like single topic. That says one opic, but I meant one topic questions. Um, but half of them will be in a set, meaning they're going to give you a prompt of some sort, and then they'll have three or four questions about that prompt. This is kind of new. In the same 90 minutes, they used to do 100 questions that were all simple standalone questions. But the test has evolved in the last few years to have more sets. They'll have a few that are based on data, like interpreting a graph or reading a chart or something. They'll have a couple that are about like a complex problem. And then they'll have a couple that are like based on a reading. Um, Usually you can skim the questions before you look at the prompt, so you kind of know what you're looking for. Don't be distracted. Don't take too long on those. Then you'll get a break. Whatever happens, you got to stay calm. At that halfway mark, if you talk to one of your homies and they're like, oh my God, I totally blew it on this one thing, it'll kind of raise your stress. So I know it's a weird thing to say, but I would kind of ignore your friends and just kind of stay in your head game. Like, if they're like, oh my God, did you get what was that one question about the thing? You're like, nah, dude, I just gotta focus. Like, don't talk to other people, don't get stressed out. And if you're starting to have like a panic attack and you feel like you did really badly, just mind over matter for a few minutes. Just tell yourself you're doing great. Just lie to yourself and be like, nope, that's fine. All I need is like 50% to pass. I'm okay. And then just leave it behind so you can transition to the FRQ without getting stressed out. Honestly, as your stress levels rise, your brain starts to shut down the memory and starts to shift toward the panic side. So you'll become more physical. It'll affect your breathing. It'll affect your heart rate. You'll get like tingly. This is why some people will like pass out during testing. Like you don't want to get into that. You want to just not worry. Like take a couple breaths. This is going to be over. You're going to be fine. It's just a few bucks, just a few more minutes. Just let it go. You're doing fine. Transition to the FRQ. When you get to the FRQ, you'll have 70 minutes, which is the same amount that you've been using in my class, 23 minutes or something. Um, you're going to design an investigation, and it's not like inventing an experimental procedure. It's not like set out six beakers and label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like you don't have to like create an experiment. You need like the outline. Like if they ask you a question like how could you test if this water um is harmful to fish, you'd be like, okay, get a group of fish inside clean water and a group of fish inside the other water and just measure their survivorship. Like you have to just keep it really basic. They just want to know if you're like a logical, science-minded person. There are experimental design practice things in the review unit of Canvas Unit 11. Then you'll have another FRQ that's like problem and solution that includes data. And then they'll have another FRQ that's problem and solution with no math involved. After you're done with those questions, you'll high five all your homies, and then you're going to come see me and tell me what a great teacher I am.
Problem and solution with math would be like the runoff questions.
For example, yeah.
Yeah, and then what would no math?
It would be a question with no math. It's just words, no numbers.
Can you give like an example?
No.
Okay.
If you guys have a question for me, please put it in the chat. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'll go on. In the multiple choice, you have to prepare yourself to see a few things you don't know. Like for maybe 5 to 10 questions, you'll just be like, I don't know. And if you got 10 questions wrong, you could still get a 5. So none of the ones you don't know should bother you. Relax. It's not a big deal. There's always like 1 or 2 questions that they don't even grade. They're just evaluating the question. Like, does the performance on this question align well with the performance of high performing students? Or is this question unrelated to strength in apes? Like, they're just testing questions. Some questions are regional. So, like, you can't be expected to know about Kansas, and some kid in Kansas can't be expected to know about the coast. There's obviously some stuff that I never taught you. There's some stuff that I taught you, but you didn't learn that day for whatever reason. And you got to relax. Like, if you just need to pass, you could technically have like 0 multiple choice questions and still salvage your average with a solid FRQ. So don't worry about the ones you don't know. What I want every single APES student to do, and by the way, this is true of your SATs and ACTs and LSAT and MCAT and every other test you'll ever take, skip around. Like, make sure that you're answering the right question. So if you skip in the question, make sure you skip on the Scantron. But just skip around. If you look at a question and you don't immediately know what they're talking about and you already know the answer, like if you don't know the answer off the top of your head right away, skip it. Go look for the next one. I'd like you to make one pass through the entire exam of 80 questions, because some of them you'll be like, oh, that's Triage of the Commons. I got it. Or you'll be like, oh, that's dissolved oxygen. I got it. I got it. And you just like, pick up all those easy ones first. Then do a second pass for the ones that you have to like read more, or you got to think about it for a second, or maybe you got to do a calculation. You'll do the ones that take work on a second pass. Then there's going to be a few that you're like, dude, I really don't know this. You'll leave those for the third pass. And no matter what, you never leave one blank. If you do what I said with the easiest first and the ones that take work second, you're still going to have like a half hour with like 10 questions you can't answer. I guarantee you're not going to run out of time. So when you get to those last 10 that you really don't know, look at them, take a guess, see if you can like rule out one of the choices. Now you're down to 33% chance. If you can rule out 2, it's 50-50. It's like flipping a coin. But once you've guessed, don't second guess yourself. Don't go back. If you answered it, move on. In all multiple choice, it is common for you to find 2 questions that are kind of right. And you always want to look for the one that's the most right. Sorry, yeah, two answers that are kind of right. And remember, like the one thing that you have to do is stay calm. Like, be there for the challenge. Like, you're going to be there for a few hours. Like, It's okay to lose a few, but like don't stress out. Don't cry, don't punch yourself, don't crap your pants, don't chew in your pencil. Like just breathe and keep going. Um it's likely you'll use most of your time, but as long as you take the easy ones first and then the takes work second and then the guessing third, you shouldn't be running out of time. Anybody want to ask me something about the multiple choice? Thumbs up if this is helpful, by the way. Okay. I got a couple other things that we can talk about. Yeah, you're allowed to write on everything. You can use the test document as scratch paper and do whatever you want on there. It's a good question. Okay. Next. Um, on the FRQ, there's 3 questions. Do the math question first. I know that some kids are like scared of math, but if you didn't know it at the beginning of the exam, you're not going to miraculously know it later. So do the math one first, whether or not you can answer it. You'll have one that has something to do with like an experiment and one that has something to do with like just words and one of them that has like a calculation or find the area or how much rainfall or whatever. That one that has the math, do the math question first and then do the math part of the math question first. Then you do the shorter one, then you do the longest one. It's really important that you do the math question first because those are the fastest points. Whether you know the math or you skip it, you've at least moved on in the least minutes. The one that has the most reading is the last one because that one takes the most amount of time per point. I want everybody to outline before writing. Like, don't go straight into writing. Writing 10 sentences should take you like 3 minutes, maybe. Take your time to outline your answer on the question document. Put down some ideas, think about some words. What is it that you really want to say? What are the variables you can measure relevant to that question? Take your time, outline, and when you're like, yeah, okay, I got to talk about there's 10 things, then you put that into sentences. Um, the different letters are often very separate. So you might look at A or B and you're like, crap, I don't even know. Don't worry about it. Go to C or D because sometimes these will be something that you do know about, even if you couldn't answer the A and the B part. And remember, the national average on these questions is somewhere between like a 2.9 to a 3.7. Sometimes you can pick up like a 4 just on like D and E. And you got like a passing score or a 4, maybe even a 5 on just those last ones at the end. So don't stress out. If you don't know A, go to B. If you don't know B, go to C. If you don't know C, later on you might remember A. You can come back and you can do them out of order. Make sure that you label the letters, like the parts A, B, C, D.
Is there like page like for question 1, 2, 3, and then you can just do letter like
No.
out of order?
There will be a question, then it's lined paper, lined paper, lined paper, question 2. Line paper, line paper, line paper. Question 3, line paper, line paper. And in that line paper, you can go in any order you want. Any order as long as it's labeled. You always show your work, double check your units. Remember, don't give stupid platitudes. Stick to variables you can measure. If you don't remember a word, it's fine. Like if you don't know what it's called, you could say it's like a metal thing that you squeeze and the wire comes out and then it binds papers together. And that's fine. Like there's no penalty for vocab at all. Um, spelling doesn't matter. Quality of your writing doesn't matter. Um, vocab doesn't matter. Spelling only matters if you ended up spelling something which is different. So like if you say hummus instead of humus, that's bad. But yeah, spelling doesn't matter. The length of your answers is irrelevant as long as it's a full sentence. And I got to tell you, the best answers are usually really brief. They just get straight to the point. If you're going to use an abbreviation, you have to introduce it. So you would say Central Intelligence Agency, parentheses, CIA. And then after that in your writing, you can just call it CIA. But you have to introduce an abbreviation.
Would that change from like A to B or question to question? And once you use it, you can keep it.
Anybody want to stop me so far? I'm going to try to finish this video before my time runs out. That would change question to question. So some general strategies for you. Stick to the stuff that you've heard in this class. They can only ask you about content that's in all of the textbooks. Like technically, when they're writing a question, they have to proof it against all 6 approved textbooks. So they'll look in the Miller book and they'll look in the Cunningham book, and then they'll look in Botkin and Keller, and they got to make sure that students could reasonably be expected to know this in every part of the country. So as long as the teachers are using the approved text, then theoretically every student in the country should have seen this content. So when you're answering, if you're like, oh, I heard this from my nut job uncle and I saw it on YouTube and I heard that one song by Drake, like that's not the right content. Stick to the stuff that you've heard in class, specifically in your book. Also, you don't need to be a hippie. It's not a job interview. Um, you don't need to give like green answers. Like humans aren't bad. Capitalism isn't evil. The AP test will always be kind of balanced, so you'll have to give like a benefit of nuclear power, a benefit of pesticide, or something like that. Don't try to sound like a hippie. Um, all the parts in the FRQ, lately they've had more like A, B, C, D, E, F. Like they'll break it up into a lot of letters, not just 3 parts per FRQ, but more letters. Answering a question, sorry. Um, um, they're always going to try to trick you with units or math. It's guaranteed that there will be one little trick. Like the graph will be on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but in the parentheses, it'll say in millions. So when you give the answer, you might think it's 2, but it's actually 2 million. If you didn't notice the unit trick, it's because you weren't paying attention. You missed one. Be careful, look for it. It's always there somewhere. All the numbers are reasonable. You know, the $2 light bulb. You shouldn't spend 40 cents on a car. That's a $40,000 car. You got the numbers wrong. Like the numbers are reasonable. The math is always simple. Like if you're doing weird elevated math, you're probably misinterpreted the question. It's all multiplication, division, like count your zeros, that kind of stuff. Um, if they talk about a cost or benefit, they'll tell you the type. So if they say social, don't talk about ecology. And if they say economic, don't talk about like social justice. You got to like focus on the type of cost and benefit they're asking about. Always give your best answer first. Be careful if they ask for 2 things that you don't give 2 versions of the same. So if they say, what are 2 ways to save water? You could say an efficient shower head and an efficient faucet, but that might be 2 versions of efficient household fixtures. So you don't want to use 2 things that are very similar. You want to use like an efficient shower head and then turn off the water when you brush your teeth because the behavioral is probably going to be different. Um, this says sleep extra tonight, but I meant to say sleep extra on Wednesday night. Speaking of test day, you'll want a good night's sleep no matter what. Cramming makes you stupider. You need a good night's sleep before the exam. On Wednesday night, if you normally sleep at 11, I'd like you to hit the sack by 10. And if you normally sleep at 1 in the morning, I want you to go to bed at midnight. You have to sleep like an extra hour. That's important. P.S. It's the biggest predictor of how well you're due if we can equalize the preparations. Sleeping is the best predictor. You want to wake up a little bit earlier so you're not rushing in the morning. This is one day when you don't need to look good. Just wear your pajamas so you're comfortable. Whatever amount of caffeine you usually do, and a solid breakfast. If you don't use caffeine, don't start on test day. And if you normally have 2 cups of espresso before school, you should have 2 cups of espresso before the exam because caffeine is addictive. And so you need to maintain your addiction through the exam. Try to work up a sweat before you walk into the exam. Apparently, a couple of jumping jacks or like a couple of ollies will help you. Skip school if you can after the test so that you're not like bothered with school. We're about to run out of time, so I'd like everybody to come back in 5 minutes once this recording stops. Is it 1 minute? Yeah, come back in like a minute or whatever it is. As soon as it's open, come back. You'll go to the girls' gym. They might put you in my room and the gym. We'll know on Wednesday. All you got to do now is study. Just your notes, no new stuff. Um, just try to remember the things that we've already discussed. I'm going to stop this recording and we'll be back in whatever it takes for me to answer 1 minute or 5 minutes or whatever. I'll see you all in just a minute.